There is so much variety out there in combination on and off-road riding gear. From full-on dirt bike, no pavement setups, to the gear you need to ride multiple days on the interstate, it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed by the amazing amount of choices out there. My intention here is to help you kind of sift through that a little bit. I'm going to give you kind of a dual sport / adventure riding gear 101. So we'll start with the basics and then let me give you some recommendations and kind of help you narrow down your search if you're looking for the gear that might work best for you. As adventure and dual sport riders, or just motorcycle campers in general, our riding will typically fall somewhere along a spectrum between mostly or all pavement on one side, mostly or all dirt on the other side, and somewhere between in the middle. That's kind of a wide somewhere between. Obviously, there's a little bit more nuance here in real life, but I'm just gonna run down options for each of these use cases. So all road, some of each, all dirt, and you can decide kind of where in between that spectrum your personal riding style falls. Let's start with adventure and dual sport riding gear that works best if you're riding mostly or all pavement. Pavement is flat, fast, and hard, so it stands to reason that you're going to look more at gear with soft armor, high abrasion resistance, and less of an emphasis on airflow. The good news is most of the motorcycle riding gear out there is designed with this type of riding in mind and features high abrasion resistance throughout, because if you crash at speed on a flat surface, you're gonna slide. Special emphasis and usually higher abrasion resistance on the parts of the body that hit the ground, like the elbows, shoulders, knees, and butt, which is not how I remember that song going. And there's soft armor present in those areas for the same reason. That's the part that tends to hit the ground. Soft armor takes a pointy impact, as in your elbow from the inside, and spreads the force out over a wider area, the full soft elbow pad on the flat pavement. This type of gear is also generally designed for comfort more, because you'll be wearing the gear for longer rides, and soft armor is more flexible when you move. Some examples of this type of gear, and yeah, I'm going to use examples from the Moto Camp Nerd store because we sell a lot of examples of this. The Climb Latitude setup is a great, more street-focused setup. The Tourmaster Adventure Light setup, which is what I've been wearing and testing lately, very comfortable gear. That's another good example. Tourmaster Mariner, over at Rocky Mountain site, you've got the MSR Explorer, MSR Voyager. I could walk into a cycle gear, throw a rock, and I'll hit a piece of gear that is designed for this. Street-focused, soft armor, high abrasion resistance. What about when it's hot? The same concepts apply, but the abrasion resistance on your non-pointy spots, as in the flat chest, the flat parts of your legs, etc., is sacrificed in favor of mesh for more airflow, or a looser weave throughout the garment for more airflow. Everything else is essentially the same. So some examples of this: the Climb Induction, the Climb Marrakesh, which doesn't have mesh panels but is just a loose weave throughout, or the Tourmaster Adventure Light Mesh, which is the mesh version of the Tourmaster Adventure Light. Helmets wise, for more street riding, you want quieter helmets with good aerodynamics and vents for airflow. Gloves wise, abrasion resistance is a high priority, along with things like palm sliders and soft knuckle protection for high-speed impacts on the pavement. Boots for mostly pavement riding are softer and will have more abrasion resistance. Impact and crush protection and support is important, but comfort is also a high priority because, again, you're going to be wearing these boots for a long time. 90% of what you'll find out there is designed with street riding in mind, so this is probably the easiest and most prevalent category. It's also the one you're most familiar with if you're coming from street riding and starting to venture off the pavement from time to time on two wheels. So that's one side of the spectrum. Let's talk about the exact opposite, and that is mostly or all dirt or off-pavement riding. Off-pavement riding generally takes place on softer or at least mixed surfaces that are uneven and require riding at a lower speed, or at least you should be riding at a lower speed. I see you guys out there. Therefore, impact protection and airflow are priorities. Crashing on an uneven surface hurts. You need armor to spread out narrow impacts to a wider area on the body and prevent penetration. So instead of crashing on a flat surface, you're crashing on a sharp rock or a stump or a tree branch or something with edges. And so your hard armor will mitigate that impact and spread it out over the surface area of the inside of the armor. It's kind of the opposite of the soft armor concept. Softer surfaces don't create as much abrasion because dirt, gravel, sand, mud, etc. will move beneath you when you hit, and the rocky surfaces you encounter are not going to be flat enough to slide along in most cases. The worst case scenario is crashing on an uneven surface and coming to an immediate and abrupt stop. Hard armor is best for this. There are many options for hard armor on the body. For the lower body, we generally wear knee pads or braces that are worn under riding pants. Those can be motocross pants or off-road moto pants that don't have integrated armor. The armor stays on your knee because it's attached to your knee. It's bigger and stiffer, and those off-road pants are designed to accommodate those knee pads underneath. Upper body armor can either be a one-piece armor setup with elbow, shoulder, chest, and back protection like the Fox Titan jacket that I have, or a combination of elbow pads and chest protector. Roost Guard is another option, but it's more for deflecting projectiles coming off of the tire of the guy in front of you than for absorbing impacts. Typically, off-road riders will wear a jersey over this type of hard armor for maximum airflow at slower off-road speeds, but that jersey provides almost no abrasion resistance. Helmet-wise, motocross helmets are what a lot of off-road riders, dedicated off-road riders wear. They don't have visors because you want to maximize the airflow and minimize the weight. Riders wear goggles underneath, and a lot of off-road MX focused helmets will have impact resistance measures like MIPS as a priority. You can find less expensive MX helmets with things like MIPS, which is a rotational impact mitigation technology. Streetier helmets don't have it as often, or they don't have it on as cheap of models. Gloves for off-road are generally thinner for better feel on the controls and because abrasion resistance is less of a priority, but they are often equipped with hard knuckle armor for deflecting branches and projectiles. That's, again, rocks coming off of the tire in front of you. Boots, this is a huge difference between street and off-road. Boots are hard and incredibly supportive. That's the name of the game here. Full motocross boots are usually recommended because they'll prevent crushing injuries from the bike falling on you, and the full support helps prevent twisted and broken angles from supporting motorcycles on uneven surfaces. So if you go to stick your leg down and you hit a rock that's at an odd angle and the bike keeps going, you're less likely to just snap your ankle if you're in a boot that doesn't allow it to move that way. Likewise, when the footbed is a piece of steel, then the bike falling on it is not going to crush your foot, either front to back or side to side. So a lot more protection there, and what you give up is flexibility, movement, and comfort. That's all well and good, but what about when it's cold and wet out? What do you do for motocross gear then? Well, pure off-road riders will just throw a weatherproof and or insulating shell just over their hard armor, or wear a waterproof pants or jacket without integrated armor. The Raptor GTX from Climb is a great example of that, or you can literally just throw frog togs or some kind of waterproof jacket over the top of your armor and call it good. Wear the jersey or don't, that's up to you. So those are the extremes, and I think probably the most obvious use cases, but really where the nuance comes in and the confusion comes in is in between the two. So when you're riding somewhere in between all dirt and all street, what do you wear? Well, like ADV and dual sport motorcycles, mixed surface riding is all about compromises and priorities. There is no motorcycle that is awesome at both street and dirt. The same is true of our gear. So really there are two schools of thought here, and they're gonna seem super obvious when I say them to you. Number one, take your street gear and make it more dirt worthy. And number two, shocker, take your dirt gear and make it a little streetier. The Climb Carlsbad and the Moto Basilisk are examples of taking street gear and trying to make it more dirt worthy. Both feature good abrasion resistance, but impact protection is beefed up with CE level 2 armor, and off-road airflow is increased with additional venting. This gives you pretty much the same level of protection on the street and better but not quite hard armor level protection when you have impacts on soft or uneven surfaces. On the flip side, gear like the Climb Raptor GTX jacket that I mentioned and pants feature waterproof and abrasion resistant shells that are oversized and designed to be worn over your hard armor dirt setups. You can throw this on for the street sections and then remove them when you leave the pavement. The downside is you have to carry the shell with you the whole time unless you're riding pavement to a base camp, where you can just leave your excess gear and hit the trail in just your armor and jersey. Helmet wise, you can wear an MX helmet on the street with goggles if it's DOE certified, but it's noisy and provides almost no protection from the elements. Most of the time, I personally run an ADV helmet with a peak and a visor. The visor can be closed for the street sections or the highway sections, and when it's wet, and then I open the visor and use goggles when I'm off-road moving at slower speeds, and a lot of those helmets are set up so that you can actually close the visor with the goggles on, so if you have to go back and forth quickly, you can. Gloves-wise, there's a lot of options for gloves with hard knuckle protection and decent leather for abrasion resistance on the highway. You don't quite get the feel on your fingers of an MX glove, but you don't want to be wearing one of those when you hit the pavement at 70 miles an hour. Boots-wise, there's a wide spectrum here as well. For mostly street with some gravel or other easy-ish off-road, I'm cool with a softer boot like Alpine Stars Corazal or the Forma Adventure. They're kind of stiff, but they're not as stiff and protective as an MX boot. If I know there's going to be technical stuff, I would rather be in my Alpine Stars Tech 7 Enduros, which is basically an MX boot with a more off-road friendly sole for walking around on uneven and slippery surfaces. That's a lot of talking. Let me give you two examples of specific use cases and explain what I wore for each in a way that'll kind of illustrate my point about how you slide back and forth depending on what you're riding and what gear you have, right? Sometimes you just wear what you have. So my first example was the Oregon BDR. Here's what I knew before we went into that trip. It was going to be 100 degrees plus every single day of the trip. It was one of the top 3 most difficult BDRs in terms of sand and technical riding. So what did I wear? I wore a Climb armored shirt with a Tactical Pro jersey over it for maximum airflow. The Tactical Pro has slightly increased abrasion resistance in the shoulders and arms than a full cloth jersey, so it would have been a little better if I'd gone down on the road, but it's still basically a jersey. I wore my Climb Mojave mesh pants with integrated knee and hip armor. I probably should have gone knee pads for this trip, but I didn't want to be messing with them every day. I just wanted pants I could pull on, so I made that sacrifice. I wore my Tech 7 Enduros for this trip for maximum ankle protection, foot protection on what I knew was going to be difficult terrain. My priority for this ride was staying cool on the harder terrain and maximizing airflow to avoid heat stroke while under exertion riding the harder sections. The harder, more technical riding demanded better boots. I did have to do about 4 hours of highway, but I decided to prioritize safety on the days of off-road riding, of which there were 5. Looking back on it, what I should have done was brought a shell with me that had some abrasion resistance for those highway days, but I didn't have one then, so I just roll the dice with the jersey. Second example is the Northern California BDR, which I did last year. The weather on this trip varied from 65 to 90 degrees every day. It is one of the top 3 easiest BDRs. So what I wore on this trip was the Moscow Moto Basilisk jacket and pants with my Alpine Stars Corazal boots and some mesh gloves. I rode 11 hours of street to the beginning of the route and had 5 hours to ride home at the end, so 16 hours of highway riding, mostly interstate. The temperatures were cooler and the riding was less technical, so I favored the more street-friendly gear with okay airflow and decent impact protection, as well as more comfortable boots. That route is less technical, so I knew that if I did crash, it would most likely be on a flatter gravel road or something like that. And most likely, again, you're rolling the dice, it's a game of most likelies, the soft armor would be enough. Helmets were basically the same for both routes, but I was visor down more in California and visor up with goggles more often in Oregon. Basically, for combined on and off-road riding, you have to decide what sacrifices and compromises make the most sense for the type of riding you'll be doing. When I'm spending more time on the street, I tend to favor streetier gear. When I'm mostly off-road with a little pavement to get there, I err on the side of harder armor and better dirt protection and just roll the dice for the limited amount of time I'll be on the street. It's a pretty simple concept when you think about it. It's just hard to narrow down what you want. And you really have to think about the types of riding you do before you invest in gear, because it's not cheap. There's no perfect answer, but hopefully you at least feel more informed about your options and what kind of gear there is that is better suited for each different type of riding. As always, we here at Moto Camp Nerd want to help make all your motorcycle adventures a success, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or need advice on riding or motorcycle camping gear or luggage. Moto Camp Nerd has all the camping and riding gear you need so that you can pack small and camp easy.